I went on a date and found out they were my sibling. I met Alex on a dating app. We clicked instantly. Our banter was effortless, and we liked all the same things: bad reality TV, deep dish pizza, and old school rock music. It felt like fate. So, after 2 weeks of texting nonstop, we decided to meet in person. The restaurant was a cozy Italian spot downtown. When I arrived, Alex was already there, sipping a glass of wine. They stood up, smiling. "Hey, you made it." I sat across from them, feeling a weird mix of nerves and excitement. Of course, I've been looking forward to this all week. Dinner was amazing. We laughed about childhood stories. Turns out we both had a pet turtle growing up. We both loved road trips and swore by the rule that car snacks were more important than gas stops. There was even a strange coincidence. Both our moms called us their little explorer when we were kids. "This is kind of crazy," Alex said, twirling their pasta. "I don't think I've ever met someone I have so much in common with." "I know, right?" I chuckled. "It's like we could be related." That's when it happened. Alex froze, mid-bite. "Wait." Their smile faltered. "Your mom's name is Linda, right?" I blinked. "Yeah. How do you know that?" They set down their fork. "Because my mom's name is Linda, too." A nervous laugh bubbled out of me. "Oh, come on. That's just another coincidence." Alex's face had gone pale. "And your dad? You said he left when you were little?" "Yeah, when I was 3. My stomach twisted. "Why?" Alex exhaled sharply, rubbing their temples. "Mine left too. When I was 5. The restaurant blurred around me. "No way." Alex reached for their phone, hands shaking. Do you have any pictures of him?" I didn't. Mom had burned every single one. But I did remember his name. "Daniel Carter." Alex visibly flinched. Their fingers hovered over their phone screen before turning it to me. A grainy, old photograph filled the screen, of a man in his 20s, grinning in front of a car. I recognized the car. It was the only thing I had left from my father, a rusted old Mustang sitting in my mom's garage. My heart slammed against my ribs. "Oh my God." Alex pushed their chair back, looking equally horrified. "We have the same dad." I felt like throwing up. This wasn't just some bad rom-com plot. This was real. My date, the person I'd been flirting with for weeks, was my half-sibling. We stared at each other in stunned silence. Then, at the same time, we both grabbed for the wine bottle and poured ourselves another glass. "Well," Alex finally said, forcing a laugh, "I guess we won't be going on a second date." "Nope." I swallowed the wine in one gulp. "Definitely not." The awkwardness sat between us like an overcooked pasta dish neither of us wanted to acknowledge. Alex was the first to break the silence. "So, do we just pretend this never happened? Or do we, I don't know, exchange sibling bracelets or something?" I let out a short, dry laugh. "I think we're supposed to do the whole dramatic reunion thing. You know, hug, cry, maybe yell at our dad for being a dirtbag." Alex groaned. "Great. I always wanted a long-lost sibling, just not like this." I wasn't sure how to feel. Just hours ago, I had been nervously excited about this date. Now, I was sitting across from my newly discovered half-sibling, trying to process the fact that we had almost kissed if this night had gone differently. I shuddered at the thought. "Okay, first rule. We never speak of this again." Alex nodded. "Agreed. The universe doesn't need to know how close we came to starring in our own messed-up soap opera." We both took another sip of wine. The initial horror was starting to settle into something else. Something strangely comforting. "So," Alex said after a beat, twirling their empty glass, "I guess we should talk about the elephant in the room." "Our dad?" I asked. "Yeah. Have you ever tried looking for him?" I shook my head. Number my mom made it clear he was the kind of guy who didn't stick around. I figured if he wanted to find me, he would. Alex sighed. "Same. I used to be angry about it, but after a while, I just stopped thinking about him." We sat there for a moment, digesting everything. It was weird. Our dad had abandoned us both, but in some twisted way, he had accidentally reunited us. After another pause, I gave Alex a small smile. You know, if we hadn't met like this, I think we'd actually be great friends. They grinned. Right? I was literally thinking the same thing. Minus the whole almost dating disaster, I kind of like having you around. I smirked. Well, lucky you. You're stuck with me now. It's kind of a sibling rule. Alex groaned dramatically. Ugh, does this mean I have to buy you birthday presents? Absolutely. They rolled their eyes but laughed, and somehow the night didn't feel so disastrous anymore. By the time we left the restaurant, things didn't feel awkward anymore. We had walked in as almost lovers, but were leaving as something far stranger, and maybe even better, a family. Alex and I walked out of the restaurant together, still reeling from what had just happened. The cold night air hit my face, making everything feel even more surreal. So, do we just go home now and pretend this was some fever dream? I asked, half joking. Alex smirked. Tempting. But now that I know I have a sibling, I kind of want to know more. About you, about Mom, even about him. Him, of course, meant our father. The man who had disappeared from both of our lives without a trace. I hesitated. I had spent my whole life not caring about him, shoving any curiosity deep down. But now? Now I had a sibling who had been left behind just like me. You know what? I said, taking a deep breath. Maybe we should find him. Alex raised an eyebrow. Seriously? I shrugged. If nothing else, I want answers. I want to know why he left. I want to know if he has more kids out there. Who knows? We might have a whole secret family. Alex let out a dramatic groan. Ugh, please no, I don't think I can handle another accidental sibling romance. I laughed. Fair point. But come on, don't you at least want to know? They exhaled, running a hand through their hair. Yeah, I do. And just like that, we made a pact. The next day, we met at a coffee shop, laptops open, ready to dig into the mystery of Daniel Carter. So, Alex said, typing furiously, did your mom ever mention where he went after he left? I shook my head. Nope. She never talked about him at all. Like, zero information. Alex sighed. Same, but I did some research last night. There's a guy named Daniel Carter who lived in our city about 20 years ago, but then he moved to Arizona. Think that could be him? Arizona? That was far. Only one way to find out, I said, clicking on a link. The page loaded, revealing a blurry photo from what looked like an old newspaper article. It was a local business spotlight from years ago, featuring a man who looked eerily familiar. Same dark eyes, same sharp jawline. Alex and I exchanged a look. That's him, they whispered. A chill ran down my spine. After all these years, we finally had a lead. Now the question was, what would we do with it? We sat there in stunned silence, staring at the blurry picture of Daniel Carter. The man in the photo didn't just look like our father. He was him. The dark eyes, the slight smirk, the messy hair. Every detail screamed familiarity. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, a mix of excitement, anger, and disbelief. Alex was the first to speak. So, Arizona, huh? That's a long way to go just to dodge responsibility. I snorted, feeling a wave of frustration. Yeah, and how does someone just get to leave their kids and start fresh somewhere else? What kind of person does that? Alex leaned back in their chair, folding their arms. The kind who clearly doesn't deserve a reunion. That thought stung. I had spent so long convincing myself that my father didn't matter, that he was just some guy who didn't care enough to stick around. But now, knowing that he had moved on, built a life somewhere else, it made me angry in ways I hadn't expected. I don't know, I said, breaking the silence. I still want to meet him. Get some kind of closure. Alex shot me a look. Closure? From a guy who bailed out on us? Maybe. Or maybe I just need to hear him say it. Hear him admit he made a mistake. Alex hesitated, then nodded. I get that. But honestly, I think we're both going to have to come to terms with the fact that he's probably not the person we've imagined him to be. He might not even care about us. I didn't want to hear it, but I knew deep down that Alex was right. Our father might have left us once, but now, seeing him from a distance, this stranger who shared our blood, he might not even want to meet us. Arizona, I muttered. It's not that far. Maybe we could go visit him. The idea was ridiculous, but also somehow exhilarating. Alex raised an eyebrow. Wait, are you saying we should just show up on his doorstep? Well, we've got nothing to lose, right? I shrugged. I don't even know if he'll be there, but at least we'll know we tried. Alex stared at me for a moment and then, finally, smiled. You're a weird person. But okay, let's do it. Road trip to Arizona, find Dad, and maybe get some answers. But no weird sibling bonding after, all right? Agreed, I said, laughing despite the nervous energy coursing through me. We spent the next few days planning our trip. The more I thought about it, the more surreal it all became. A week ago, I had no idea that I had a sibling, let alone a father to track down in Arizona. It felt like I was stepping into a different life entirely. On the day of our trip, Alex and I piled into my car, bags stuffed with snacks, maps, and all the stuff needed for a road trip. We left the city early, the sun barely rising over the horizon. The drive was filled with half-jokes and deep conversations, our bond growing with each mile. We talked about everything, our childhoods, what we'd imagined family to be, and what we hoped to find when we finally met our father. As the miles stretched on, I felt a sense of anticipation settle in my stomach. The closer we got to Arizona, the more the reality of our mission hit me. We were really going to do this. We finally arrived in the small town where our father supposedly lived. It felt strange. Everything was so normal, so suburban. A far cry from the chaotic, dysfunctional idea I had built in my mind about him. We found the address, parked in front of a modest house, and sat there for a while, unsure of what to do next. Should we knock? Alex asked. Or just wait until he shows up at the door with a tray of cookies and says, I've been waiting for you two my whole life? I snorted. You'd be the first person to faint if that happened. Alex chuckled. True. But seriously, what's the plan here? We knock and say what? I took a deep breath, trying to steady my nerves. I don't know. Hey, we're your kids. You left us and we've been looking for you for years. Simple enough, right? Alex gave me a look. You sure you want to go in there and have that conversation? Before I could respond, the door creaked open. A man stepped out, older now, his hair graying at the temples, but with the same face I had seen in that photograph. He looked at us, confused at first, and then his eyes widened. Who are you? I felt the world stop. This was it. The moment I'd been waiting for. The moment I would find out if he was ready to answer for everything. I opened my mouth to speak, but Alex beat me to it. We're your kids. The words hung in the air like an electric charge. We stood there, frozen, staring at the man who, by blood, was our father. His face went pale, and for a second he looked as though he might faint. Then his expression flickered between disbelief, guilt, and something else I couldn't quite place. You're my kids? His voice cracked slightly, like he couldn't believe it. Yeah, I said, my heart pounding in my chest. Daniel Carter, right? We've been looking for you. For a long moment, he didn't say anything. He just stood there, blinking at us as if we were some strange apparition. Then his eyes flicked over to me and Alex, pausing on our faces as if trying to process it all. I don't understand, he stammered. I didn't think I'd ever see either of you again. Alex crossed their arms, their voice tight. Yeah, well, we've got questions. A lot of questions. My stomach twisted. This wasn't going how I imagined it would. I thought I'd have this big, dramatic moment, maybe some tears, maybe a fight. But instead, he just seemed lost. Can we, can we come in? I asked, my voice quieter than I expected. He nodded slowly, stepping aside to let us in. The house was small but cozy, one of those places that had clearly seen better days. There was a faint smell of old wood and faded books in the air. It felt like time had stopped here. We sat down in his living room, the tension thick as we waited for him to say something. After a while, Daniel finally spoke, his voice quieter now, as though he was choosing his words carefully. "I didn't know how to find you," he said, his eyes meeting mine. "Your mother, she made it clear I wasn't wanted in your lives. I thought you were better off without me." I couldn't hide the anger that flared up inside me. "You didn't even try to find us, did you? You just disappeared, left us to pick up the pieces." Alex shifted uncomfortably in their seat. "That's not good enough, Dad. You left us with nothing but questions. You think we could just move on from that?" Daniel looked down at his hands, his shoulders sagging. "I wasn't proud of what I did. But I was young. I made mistakes. And I thought I was doing the right thing by leaving." I almost laughed. "The right thing? By abandoning your kids?" He winced. "I thought it would be easier on all of us. Your mother and I? Things were bad between us. I thought I was just causing more harm by staying." "So you thought disappearing was the solution?" I shot back, frustration creeping into my voice. Alex gave me a nudge, urging me to calm down. "We just need to understand why. Why didn't you try to come back? Why didn't you ever reach out?" Daniel's eyes welled with tears, and for the first time I saw genuine regret in them. "I was scared. I didn't think you'd want anything to do with me. I failed you both. And now, I don't know if I can make it right." I swallowed hard, the weight of his words hitting me like a punch to the gut. This wasn't some heartless monster standing before us. It was a man who had lived with his choices, who had seen the consequences of his actions. Alex spoke softly, almost as if to themselves. "We don't know what to do with all this. You can't just show up after all this time and expect us to forget everything." I looked at Alex, then back at Daniel. This wasn't about forgiveness. Not yet. We needed time. But I couldn't just walk away without saying what had been on my mind for years. "I don't know if I can forgive you," I said, my voice shaky. "But I do know this. We're here now. And we're not leaving until we get some answers. For us, for the lives you missed." Daniel's face crumbled and he nodded. "I understand. I don't expect you to forgive me right away. I'm just glad you're here." For the rest of the afternoon, we talked. Slowly, cautiously, as though we were all walking on thin ice. Daniel answered questions, explained his side, and offered what little apology he could. But the truth was, there was no easy answer to what happened. He couldn't undo the past, and neither could we. When we finally stood to leave, Daniel seemed smaller, like the years of avoidance and guilt had taken their toll. "I'm sorry," he said one last time. "I wish things had been different." I looked at Alex, who met my gaze with the same complicated mix of emotions. And then I turned back to Daniel. "We're not saying goodbye forever," I said, my voice steady now. "But this is a start, and we'll figure out what comes next. Together." As we walked out the door, the sun setting behind us, I felt a strange sense of peace settle in. There was still so much left to unpack, so many questions unanswered. But for the first time, we had opened the door. And maybe, just maybe, we could start rebuilding what had been broken so long ago. Alex nudged me. "Well, that wasn't as awful as I thought it would be." I smiled. "Yeah, not exactly a hallmark moment, but I think it's a start." "Agreed," Alex said, their eyes glinting with something close to hope. "Who knows? Maybe we'll even get to enjoy Thanksgiving this year." I laughed, feeling the first genuine lightness in my chest in weeks. The future was still uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, it didn't feel like we were walking through it alone. We had found each other after all, and maybe that was enough for now. The weeks after that encounter with Daniel passed in a blur. The awkwardness of meeting our father had faded, replaced by something that felt like a slow, hesitant truce. We kept in touch with him sporadically, checking in every now and then, and though it wasn't the reunion of dreams, it was something. Something I never thought we'd have. The most surprising part, though, was how much our bond as siblings grew. Alex and I had gone from strangers to something close to family in the span of a few weeks. We texted every day, shared embarrassing stories from our childhoods, and even began planning more adventures together. We still didn't know how to process our past, but we started carving out a new future, one where we were no longer alone. It felt weird at first, like I was building a new life on top of an old one. But as time passed, it started to feel normal. Then came the phone call. It was a Wednesday afternoon when I picked up the phone. The screen said, "Mom," but when I answered, it wasn't her voice that greeted me. "Hey, it's me," Daniel said, sounding uncharacteristically nervous. "Dad?" My heart skipped a beat. Why was he calling? "Yeah. Listen. I've been thinking a lot about everything, and I know I've missed a lot of time, but I was wondering if you two might be interested in coming out here for Thanksgiving. Maybe we could start fresh. Together. Thanksgiving. I hadn't celebrated with him in years, hadn't even considered it. But now that the invitation was on the table, I found myself filled with an odd mix of excitement and dread. I glanced at my phone, where Alex had already messaged me. "Call me. Important." I dialed Alex's number immediately. "Yo," they answered after the first ring. "What's up?" "You will not believe who just called me," I said, pacing around the apartment. "Let me guess. Dad?" "Yeah. He wants us to come out to Arizona for Thanksgiving." There was a long pause. "Wait, what?" "I know, it's crazy, right?" Alex didn't respond right away, and I could practically feel their mind racing. After a moment, they said, "Well, do you think we should go?" "It's kind of a big deal." "I don't know. I mean, it feels like everything's moving so fast, but maybe we should give it a shot. We've been talking about trying to rebuild, right?" "True. But are we ready for that?" I didn't have an answer. Honestly, I wasn't sure. But a part of me felt like this was the only way forward. If we didn't try, we'd always wonder what could have been. "I don't know," I said, sinking into the couch. "I guess I'm just scared. What if it doesn't work out? What if this whole thing blows up in our faces?" "I get it," Alex replied, their voice softer now. "But maybe, just maybe, this is our shot. If we don't go, we'll never know if we could have made it work. It's Thanksgiving, right? A fresh start. Not perfect, but maybe something worth trying." Their words made sense, and I took a deep breath. "Okay, we'll go." "All right," Alex said. "Let's do this. Family Thanksgiving. This could either be really great or super awkward. Either way, I'm in." We made our decision. A week later, we packed our bags, took a flight to Arizona, and landed in the small town where Daniel lived. The air was dry, the sun setting behind the distant mountains, casting everything in an amber glow. It looked so different from the city we had left behind. Daniel picked us up from the airport, and even though the tension was still there, an invisible barrier we hadn't yet crossed, it was different this time. We weren't walking in as strangers, but as two people trying to build something new. When we arrived at his house, it felt surreal. There was a table set with a modest Thanksgiving dinner: turkey, mashed potatoes, green beans, and pie. It wasn't the big family gathering I'd imagined, but it felt like a start. Daniel looked at us nervously as we sat down. "I know it's not much," he said quietly, "but I wanted to do something for you. I don't know how to make up for all the time we've lost, but I'm trying." I exchanged a glance with Alex, who gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. "Thanks," I said, my voice quieter than I intended. It's a start." And so we ate. Slowly, cautiously at first, but as the evening went on, something began to shift. We shared stories, laughed about small things, and even poked fun at each other. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. There were no grand confessions or tearful apologies, but there was a subtle, almost tentative understanding between us. When dessert came around, Daniel hesitated. "I don't know what the future holds for us," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "But I want you to know I'm here now. I'll be here, if you'll have me." We didn't say anything right away. Instead, Alex took my hand under the table and we squeezed each other's fingers tightly. Maybe it wasn't about rushing into forgiveness. Maybe it was about taking one step forward, even if that step was small. "Thanks, Dad," Alex said, their voice steady. "We'll see what happens. One day at a time, right?" I smiled, feeling a sense of peace settle in. Yeah, one day at a time. And for the first time, I believed it. Maybe we were still a little broken. Maybe things would never be as they once were. But we were here. We had come this far. And maybe that was enough. The dinner came to an end, and the evening seemed to stretch on, suspended in an uneasy but hopeful quiet. We'd made it through the first big hurdle, sharing a meal, sitting at the same table. It was progress. It felt like a fragile kind of peace, one that might crumble at the slightest push. But for the first time in years, it didn't feel like we were drowning in the past. It felt possible. Daniel sat back in his chair, his eyes flicking between Alex and me, as though he was waiting for some kind of acknowledgement, some sign that we were ready to make the next move. "Look," Daniel started, his voice strained with the weight of everything unsaid. "I know it's going to take time. You don't owe me forgiveness, but I want you to know that I'm not running away this time. I'm not going anywhere." Alex didn't respond immediately. They just stared at him, their face unreadable. I could feel the tension building again, the air so thick you could almost cut it with a knife. We hadn't talked about the things that still mattered. The anger, the abandonment, the years of pain that Daniel's silence had caused. How could we just pretend that didn't exist? The silence between us became deafening. The kind of silence where all the things you didn't want to say came rushing to the surface. "I don't know if I can just let it go," Alex finally said, their voice low but cutting. "You left us. You disappeared for years and you expect us to just accept that? Like it was nothing?" The words hit Daniel like a physical blow. He flinched, his eyes briefly darting to the table before he met our gaze again. "I know," he whispered. "I know. I never meant to hurt you. I didn't know what else to do. I wasn't strong enough. I thought if I left, maybe things would get better. For everyone. But I was wrong. I was so wrong." "Wrong?" I snapped, suddenly rising to my feet. "You think you were wrong? You didn't just get it wrong, Dad. You ruined things. You ruined us." The room seemed to hold its breath as my voice rose, an echo of all the years of rage that had been buried inside me, the hurt I'd never known how to express, the anger that had festered since the moment he walked away. "Do you know what it's like, Dad?" I continued, my words coming faster now. "To grow up feeling like you're broken, like something's missing inside of you and never know why? To spend every year wondering where you are, why you didn't care enough to come back? We needed you, and you were nowhere to be found." I saw Daniel's face twist in pain, but I didn't care. I needed him to hear it. He needed to hear the weight of the years that he had just let go. "I never wanted to hurt you," Daniel said, his voice cracking. "But I hurt you, and I hurt myself too. I know there's no excuse for what I did, and I'm so, so sorry." I shook my head, my vision blurry from the tears that had started to well up in my eyes. "Sorry doesn't change anything. You can't just say sorry and expect it to be okay." The room was silent for a moment, and I could feel the weight of my words hanging in the air. It wasn't enough to make him understand. It wasn't enough to fix everything. We had all been broken by the years he had been gone. There was no way to undo that damage. And yet, in the depths of my anger, I felt a shift. A tiny, almost imperceptible shift. Something was changing between us, but it was a slow burn. It wouldn't be easy and it wouldn't be quick. But maybe, just maybe, it was worth fighting for. I don't know if we'll ever get back to what we should have been, I said, my voice softer now, as I looked at Alex and then at Daniel. But I don't want to just walk away from you. Not now. Not again. Alex was quiet for a long time, their face unreadable. Then finally they spoke, their words heavy with meaning. I don't know if we'll ever get to the point where we forgive you, but I do know that we're here now. That's all I can promise. Daniel nodded, his eyes glistening with tears that he was trying to hide. He took a deep breath, his shoulders slumping as if a weight had been lifted. Thank you. Thank you both. I know it'll take time. But I'll be here, and I'll prove to you that I mean it. I looked at him, really looked at him for the first time. He wasn't perfect. Far from it. But I could see the pain, the regret, the effort in his eyes. It was a start. Not the end of our story, but maybe the beginning of something that had been waiting for years to unfold. As we stood up to leave, the air seemed lighter. Not perfect, not fixed, but a little less heavy. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was drowning in the silence of the past. Alex grabbed my hand, giving it a tight squeeze. One day at a time, right? They said, their voice filled with determination. Yeah, I whispered back. One day at a time. As we walked out the door, a cold wind blew through the night, but it didn't feel like the storm was over. It felt like it was finally beginning. And maybe, just maybe, we would weather it together. And though the road ahead would be long and uncertain, I knew that this was a story we weren't done telling yet.